My home state, Tennessee, is known for several things. Country music is one, thanks to Nashville's booming music industry. Another is the musician, actress, author, and humanitarian, Dolly Parton. Finally, one thing that Tennessee and most southern states are known for is southern hospitality. I pose the question though, is this hospitality extended to everyone? Does y'all really mean all? Or is that only for the supposed lifestyles we're told to agree with? I'm going to be uncovering acts of underhanded and outright homophobia that Tennessee has been complacent to over the years, and discussing why lawmakers seem to be trying to outlaw the existence of the LGBT community. I have several ideas on why acceptance is such a polarizing concept, but first, let's give some background. Homosexuality and gender nonconformity has been a taboo part of Southern culture for as far back as I or anyone in my family can remember. This can be accredited to the strong biblical roots that the South is proud to bear. Us Tennesseans are planted right in the middle of a region of the U.S. deemed the Bible Belt by many Americans. The Bible Belt is a cluster of states in the southeastern corner of the United States, where the fundamentalist Christian religion predominates. With religion being such a driving force for the morals and ethics of Southerners, it comes as no surprise when biblical text begins to influence the state laws surrounding us. In the study, Support for Lesbian and Gay Rights, How and Why the South Differs from the Rest of the Country by Gregory B. Lewis and Reynold V. Gallup, the authors explain how religion dictates their views, saying that Southerners' greater Protestantism, evangelism, and religiosity are the strongest contributors to their stronger resistance to gay rights, both at an individual and a contextual level. In addition, the strong presence of evangelicals appears to create a climate in which Southerners oppose lesbian and gay rights more strongly than demographically, religiously, and politically comparable Americans in the rest of the country.
As Pope Francis has said, married life is such a beautiful thing, and we must protect it, protect the children.
While older generations believe they are upholding the very foundation of our country, one nation under God, they fail to realize that they might instead be stepping on and stunting the lives of the youth developing under their reign. We'll now begin to discuss some of the legislature, both past and present, that Tennessee has proposed regarding the lives of gay and transgender individuals. Back in 1995, a Nashville man identified as a John Doe was subject to a misdemeanor charge, which violated the Tennessee Homosexual Practices Act. Nashville attorney Daniel Horwitz assisted in expunging the man's record in 2016 and was surprised to see that the charge existed, stating, "I had no idea that Nashville was still prosecuting sex between consenting same-sex adults as a criminal offense well into the mid-90s. The Homosexual Practices Act was seen as invalid in 1996, as it conflicted with the Tennessee state constitution's privacy laws. While the abolition of this anti-gay law was progress, it did not mean that the rights of gay and transgender citizens were protected. In fact, an incident at Belmont University in 2010 negates this entirely."
When I heard that, I was, again, confused. I was like, and I went through my head thinking, well, what else could it be? Like, I mean, did she lose her job then?
I believe a private Christian institution has a right to define their policies.
Lisa Howe was hired as the head coach of the women's soccer program in the spring of 2005. 5 years later, she was given an ultimatum: quit or be fired. The reasoning for this sudden departure was because of her sexuality.
They told her because her morals and values conflicted with Belmont's mission statement, she could no longer be an employee at the university.
The article Pro-Business or Anti-Gay: Disguising LGBT Animus as Economic Legislation by Alex Reed further explores this. According to news reports, the catalyst for Howe's departure was a November 2010 team meeting in which Howe confided to her players that she was a lesbian and that she and her partner of 8 years were expecting a child. After receiving a complaint from a player's father, Belmont's athletic director allegedly told Howe that if she did not resign, she would be fired. Tennessee's employment non-discrimination law does not include sexual orientation or gender identity. According to the Williams Institute at the UCLA School of Law, as of February 2017, 94,700 LGBT Tennessean workers are left without protection. This is not only a problem for working-age citizens, but also for those pursuing any form of education. Some Tennesseans' biggest concerns about their children's educations is whether or not prayer is being kept in schools. But what are we to do when religious freedom becomes a thinly veiled excuse to discriminate against gay peers? In the study Constructing Victimhood, Opposition to Legislation Protecting LGBT Students Against Bullying, author and student Kiam-Long Daniel Lai explains just that. He writes, the Tennessee Senate passed the Classroom Protection Act, which was nicknamed the Don't Say Gay Bill, but failed to pass in the House.
What do you say to those who say you have an agenda to push and they're calling this bill really flat-out discrimination?
Well, it doesn't. My bill is actually saying we're not going to speak for it, we're not going to speak against it. We're going to leave it up to the families to decide, and that's where I think it's best handled, controversial issues like that.
In 2014, conservative political leaders in Tennessee filed the Religious Viewpoints Anti-Discrimination Act, nicknamed the License to Bully Bill by the media, which attempted to amend anti-bullying statutes in Tennessee to ensure that school staff, quote, does not discriminate against a student's publicly stated voluntary expression of a religious viewpoint, end quote. In other words, students would be allowed to express religious condemnation of homosexuality. If it had passed, it would have created a religious exemption for bullies expressing their disapproval of any sexual minorities or gender. The South, a place peppered with rigid tradition, can seem suffocating to anyone who strays from the normalcy that we come to expect. However, it's not all bad. Many bona fide celebrities born and raised in Tennessee have been outspoken in their support for the LGBT community. Taylor Swift, Dolly Parton, and Chattanooga native Leslie Jordan are just a few. Leslie Jordan has spoken out about his adolescence and the attitude surrounding his sexuality many times. As a gay man growing up in 1950s Tennessee, he was brought up believing that homosexuality at its core was a sin. In an interview with Mayim Bialik, Jordan explains how he wrestled with the Word of God in his youth and struggled to identify with certain parts of his faith.
I'm very curious, though. I always want to ask this of Southern people. Like, are you a religious person? Do you believe in God? Do you have a practice around that? Like, what's that like? And is it a part of sort of keeping sober, emotionally sober?
What happened with me was, of course, I rejected the path that I was raised in, that we have to believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross. I didn't reject that in any ways. I turned my back on it. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a good Christian. That's the way I was raised, to follow the teachings. And I tried, but then, the big, and then you start thinking, but wait a minute, I am gay, and I believe that I was born this way, and I don't think that's necessary. It's not my cross to bear. That's what you say. Well, it's your cross to bear. No, it's not my cross to bear. It's what I am.
Jordan, despite his struggle, is now an acclaimed actor, writer, and singer whose publicity has only grown thanks to a myriad of viral videos. He's loved by many, but unfortunately, Jordan is the exception and not the standard. Overall, Southern society has its faults, as do all people, and bigotry exists everywhere. However, it's important that we recognize the things that people use to justify this behavior. Religion is not a tool of hate, and those who use it, I believe, are not hateful. But we must realize that certain ideas can be construed and can be used to ostracize certain groups. In this case, it would be the LGBT community. Sheltered homes create sheltered children, and fear has no place in the minds of our youth. It is the duty of parents, of educators, of lawmakers to expand the worldviews of our young, to teach them that there is not just one life to live. No threats of hellfire or eternal damnation, but rather reassurance and acceptance. We must encourage thought-out discussion, and it must be fostered at dinner tables and in classrooms. People must be willing to go against their own preconceived ideas of those around them, and to step out into unknown lights with nothing but their minds to guide them. If we, as Southerners, are truly bent on being hospitable to everyone, then we must learn acceptance. We should not focus on policing the identities of others, but rather come to understand them and their story. They deserve to be protected, just like anyone else in this country.